how do we even begin to know what life was like thousands of years ago? I mean, before everyone was writing everything down, it feels a bit like asking your parents about when you were a baby, relying on their stories, maybe a few photos.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And now scale that challenge up to entire civilizations.
Yeah.
How do we piece together their stories, their successes, their way of thinking, often without their own words, to guide us directly? It's quite the historical puzzle.
Exactly. And archaeology helps, of course, finding objects, ruins. Like, you might find an abandoned village and figure out, okay, maybe a long drought drove people away, even without a diary entry saying no rain for years.
Precisely. We weigh the physical evidence left behind. And today, we want to focus specifically on the positive side of things, the innovation, the cooperation, the ingenuity we can uncover from studying the past. It's actually an approach similar in spirit to channels like Mindful Moments. On YouTube, they use AI book analysis to encourage that kind of deeper reflection and critical thinking about information.
Okay, great. So let's start way back. Early humans, nomads, moving around all the time. Where did they, sleep? Shelter.
Well, their survival really hinged on being adaptable. In warmer places, they'd use animal hides, stretch them over simple frames, portable shelters, basically. You could imagine a kid, maybe like this 7-year-old nomad girl, Tarak. Maybe she loved sleeping out under the stars sometimes.
Easy to pack up and move.
Right. And in colder areas or places with lots of rock, caves were the obvious choice. And sometimes they left those incredible paintings behind telling stories visually, which amazingly have lasted.
Resourceful, definitely, using whatever was around them. So what made them eventually settle down? Why start farming, especially in the Fertile Crescent?
It really came down to food, needing a stable supply. If you stay in one spot too long as a hunter-gatherer, you deplete the local wild plants and animals. So the need to have food consistently available, well, that pushed them towards cultivating crops, especially grains. That's the big shift to agriculture.
Makes sense. Need eats, right? But farming there, I mean, the Fertile Crescent, it wasn't always easy with water, was it? Not like constant rain.
No, definitely not. The land near the rivers was fertile, sure, but rainfall could be really unpredictable. And this is where you see their cleverness shine. These early farmers, they figured out how to dig irrigation canals.
Okay.
Yeah, diverting water from the rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates out to their fields. It was, frankly, a brilliant solution to a major environmental challenge. Probably needed some organization to build and manage them too.
Real problem solving. Speaking of rivers, let's talk about the Nile. Egypt, we always hear about the floods. Were those just catastrophic, or was there more to it?
Well, if you're a modern farmer, a flood is usually bad news, right? Total disaster.
Right.
But for the ancient Egyptians, the Nile's flood was the lifeblood of their civilization. It was predictable, happened around the same time each year, so they could prepare. And crucially, when the waters receded, they left behind this thick layer of black silt.
Fertilizer.
Exactly. Natural fertilizer, packed with nutrients, perfect for growing crops. And they didn't just let it happen. They developed sophisticated canal systems to manage the floodwaters, channel them, store water for the dry season. It was foundational.
So the flood was actually a blessing in a way, managed properly. How did Egypt go from scattered farming villages along this river to, well, Egypt, the unified kingdom?
That unification seems to have happened around 5,000 years ago. Tradition credits a king named Narmer. He was ruler of Upper Egypt in the south, and he conquered Lower Egypt, the Delta region in the north.
And he combined the crowns, right?
Yes, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. He put them together to create the double crown, a very powerful symbol that he ruled the entire land, the two lands as they called it.
The double crown, got it. And the ruler became known as the pharaoh. What did that mean exactly? More than just king?
Oh, absolutely. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. They were seen as a god on earth, or at least a crucial intermediary between the gods and the people. They often carried symbols like the shepherd's crook.
Like guiding their flock.
Precisely. A symbol of protecting and guiding the people of Egypt.
Fascinating symbolism. Okay, they built massive monuments, we know that. But day-to-day stuff, records, administration, how did they write things down? Still stone and clay?
They certainly used stone for important inscriptions, and likely clay early on, like the Sumerians. But the Egyptians came up with a major innovation, papyrus.
Made from the reeds along the Nile.
Exactly. They processed the papyrus reeds into a kind of paper. And it was a game changer. Much easier to write on than carving stone or pressing into wet clay. Lighter, easier to carry around, easier to store.
Sounds way more convenient, like moving from giant stone tablets to notebooks. Any downsides?
The main one, unfortunately for us, is durability. Papyrus is organic material. It decays, it gets damaged by water, insects, time.
Ah,
So while baked clay tablets from Mesopotamia can last thousands of years if buried, a lot of the papyrus records have simply crumbled away. We've lost a vast amount of information because of it. Stone inscriptions last, but everyday stuff, much is gone.
that's a shame. But we do know a lot about their beliefs, especially about death and the afterlife, thanks to mummification in the tombs. It seems like an incredibly careful process.
It truly was, and it tells us so much about their worldview, their deep belief in an afterlife. Take Pharaoh Cheops, builder of the Great Pyramid, back in the Old Kingdom. When he died, the priests would have immediately started the mummification.
What did that actually involve? It sounds
It
intense.
was very meticulous. They'd first ritually cleanse the body, often with wine and spices. Then came the removal of the internal organs, liver, stomach, lungs, intestines.
They took them out.
Yes, because they decay quickly. But they didn't discard them. They were preserved separately, often with special spices, and placed in containers called canopic jars. Interestingly, the heart was usually left in place, or sometimes removed, treated, and put back.
Why the heart?
They believed the heart was the center of intelligence and emotion. Crucially, they thought it would be weighed by the god Osiris in the afterlife, balanced against the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and justice. That determined your fate.
The weighing of the heart. Wow. Okay, so organs out, heart maybe stays. What next?
The body was then packed and covered with natron, a type of natural salt, to draw out all the moisture. This took weeks. After it was completely dried, it was cleaned again, anointed with oils and resins, and then carefully wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen strips.
Layers and layers of linen.
Exactly. And often protective amulets and jewelry would be placed within the wrappings. Finally, a mask, often made of gold for pharaohs, sculpted to look like the deceased, was placed over the head.
Why the mask?
To help the person's soul, their ka and ba, recognize his own body in the afterlife. And there was often a final ritual, the opening of the mouth ceremony, where priests would touch the mummy's mouth and senses with special tools.
To allow them to function in the next life.
That was the belief, to restore the ability to see, hear, speak, and eat in the afterworld. It shows such a profound hope and care for the deceased's journey.
Incredible detail. And these carefully prepared mummies needed a safe place. The tombs evolved too, didn't they? From just pits to pyramids.
They did. Very early on, burials were simpler, maybe in pits or underground rooms. But these were easily robbed, and protecting the body and the grave goods was paramount for the afterlife journey. So they started building mastabas. They're flat-topped rectangular structures made of mud brick or stone, built over an underground burial chamber reached by a shaft. More protection. But even those weren't enough, it seems. This architectural drive, this need for security and perhaps divine connection eventually led to the pyramid, starting with stepped pyramids, then evolving into the true pyramids like the ones at Giza.
Like the Great Pyramid of Cheops you mentioned. The scale is just mind-boggling. What was the main driver for building something that massive?
Primarily, protection for the pharaoh's mummy and the treasures buried with him, everything he'd need in the afterlife. But it was also undoubtedly a statement. A symbol of the pharaoh's immense power, his connection to the sun god Ra, reaching towards the heavens. Think about the Great Pyramid, maybe over 20 years to build, over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons.
How did they even...
Exactly. With relatively basic tools, copper chisels, ropes, ramps, sledges, and an incredible amount of organized human labor. It speaks volumes about their engineering skills, their organizational capacity, and the shared belief system that could motivate such a colossal multi-generational project.
It really does. The sheer coordination is amazing. Now, thinking about cooperation and shared values, sometimes stories and fables give us insight too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there ancient tales that highlight positive ideas, like working together?
Oh, definitely. There's a wonderful example from the Jakarta Tales of India about a flock of quail and a hunter. The hunter kept catching them easily because they couldn't agree on anything.
Okay.
But then one wise quail suggested that when the hunter threw his net, they should all flap their wings together, lift the net, fly off with it, and drop it on a thorny bush to escape. And it worked. They were safe as long as they cooperated. But eventually they started squabbling again over small things. Who bumped into whom when landing, stuff like that. They lost their unity. The next time the hunter came, they couldn't coordinate, and he caught them all, one by one.
Unity is strength. A very clear message.
A timeless one. And, thinking about these different approaches to knowledge, it connects back to what we were saying about appreciating nuances. Much like the kind of thoughtful analysis you find exploring sources like mindful moments, or in our discussions here, Understanding the past means looking for these underlying values and complexities, not just the surface events.
Right, seeing the different layers. Okay, you mentioned India. Let's jump to ancient China. What innovations stand out there?
Ancient China was a powerhouse of invention. One story I love is about the discovery of silk, attributed to Lei Zhu, an empress. The legend says a silkworm cocoon accidentally fell into her hot tea.
Into her tea. Seriously.
That's the story. And as she fished it out, the heat started to unravel the cocoon, revealing this incredibly fine, strong thread. Her curiosity piqued. She investigated further, figured out it came from silkworms feeding on mulberry leaves, and developed the methods for reeling the silk and weaving it.
Wow. From a tea mishap to a luxury industry that changed trade across the world. That's incredible. What about writing in China? It looks so different from Western scripts.
It developed quite distinctly. The earliest confirmed Chinese writing we have is from the Shang dynasty, around 3,000 years ago or more. They used pictograms, essentially little pictures representing words or ideas.
Picture words.
Exactly. And importantly, they often carved these onto oracle bones, turtle shells, and animal bones used for divination, and also cast them into bronze vessels. Because these materials are durable, many examples have survived, like the character for sun might have started as a simple circle with a dot inside.
And that evolved over time, I assume.
Greatly. The characters became more stylized and complex. And later, a huge innovation was woodblock printing. Carving characters onto a wooden block, inking it, and then pressing it onto paper allowed for much faster reproduction of texts compared to writing everything by hand. A very early form of mass communication, really.
From bone carvings to printing presses. Another leap. Okay, we've touched on Egypt, India, China. What about ancient Africa, beyond Egypt? It sometimes feels like there's less physical evidence or fewer written accounts compared to some other places.
That's often true in terms of, say, massive stone monuments or vast libraries of texts surviving from some regions and periods in sub-Saharan Africa. But that absolutely doesn't mean there wasn't rich history and culture. Instead of relying solely on written records, many ancient African societies had incredibly strong oral traditions.
Stories passed down.
Exactly. History, myths, laws, wisdom, all transmitted generation to generation through expert storytellers, griots, and elders. It's a different form of record keeping, but incredibly vital and sophisticated.
Can you give an example? What kind of stories?
Well, one very famous figure in West African folklore is Anansi the spider. He's a trickster character, often clever, sometimes greedy. There are countless Anansi tales. One tells of Anansi and Turtle inviting each other to dinner, but each plays tricks to keep the guest from eating. It kind of highlights reciprocity, even if negatively here.
Okay. A lesson in how not to treat guests.
Perhaps. Another story tells of Anansi being invited to feasts in several different villages all at the same time. He tries to attend them all by tying webs to himself, leading to each village, planning to follow the web that tugged first. But all of these started at once. The webs pulled him in all directions, and he ended up stretched thin and missing out completely.
A cautionary tale about greed or wanting too much.
Absolutely. About being content, perhaps. These stories weren't just entertainment. They carried deep cultural knowledge and moral lessons.
It's a powerful way to preserve culture. Okay, let's swing over to ancient Greece. We think of philosophy, democracy, but also Sparta, right? Very different societies.
Extremely different. Sparta was, first and foremost, a military state. Society was organized around creating the best soldiers. Boys were taken for training from a very young age, focused entirely on obedience, discipline, physical toughness, and combat skills. Everything else was secondary.
That saying, come back with your shield, or on it.
That perfectly sums up the Spartan ethos. Surrender or cowardice was the ultimate disgrace. The shield was essential. Dying in battle while protecting yourself and your comrades was the ideal.
Intense. And Athens, almost the polar opposite.
In many ways, yes. Athens experimented with democracy. Male citizens could gather in the assembly, the forum, debate issues, and vote directly on laws and leaders. It wasn't perfect, excluded many people, but it was groundbreaking.
And they believed education was key to making democracy work.
They absolutely did. The Athenian ideal was that a citizen needed to be informed to participate wisely in government. You needed to understand the laws, evaluate leaders, grasp concepts like taxes. So education wasn't just for the elite. It was seen as important for the functioning of the state.
What did Athenian education look like then? Not just military drills, I assume.
No, quite different. Boys learned reading, writing, often on wax tablets. They could reuse arithmetic, maybe geometry. They studied literature, especially the epics of Homer, the Iliad and Odyssey. Music was important too, learning the lyre. And physical training wasn't ignored: wrestling, running, but it was part of a more rounded development, aiming for both a sound mind and a sound body.
A broader ideal.
Yes. The philosopher Plato argued strongly that only educated citizens could truly participate in ruling and avoid being tricked by tyrants or demagogues. He used a simple analogy. If your neighbor told you there was a new law saying everyone had to give him apples every Wednesday, an uneducated person might just believe him. An educated one would ask, where is this law written? Who passed it?
Good point. Critical thinking was essential. All right, last stop on our tour. Ancient Rome. They left a huge mark, obviously. What are some key positive contributions we still see or benefit from?
Oh, Rome's legacy is immense. Their engineering, for one. They built incredible roads, paved, durable, straight connecting their vast empire. Think of the Appian Way outside Rome. Parts of it are still there, still usable after 2,000 years.
That's amazing longevity.
It is. And a key reason for that was their mastery of concrete. They developed a unique recipe using volcanic ash, lime, and water that created an incredibly strong, durable, and even somewhat waterproof building material. They used it for roads, aqueducts, harbors, apartment buildings. It enabled them to build on a massive scale.
Concrete. I didn't realize they basically invented that form of it. Anything else that reflects Roman values or impact?
Well, there's the story of Cincinnatus. He was supposedly a simple farmer who was appointed dictator during a military emergency. He led Rome to victory, and then, instead of clinging to power, he immediately resigned and went back to his farm.
A model of civic virtue.
Exactly. Held up as the ideal serving when needed, but not seeking power for its own sake. A real contrast to later figures like Julius Caesar, who very much wanted supreme power. Of course, their influence is everywhere today. We use the Roman alphabet. Many of our month names come from Latin. They popularized putting leaders' faces on coins. Even early swimming pools owe something to Roman baths.
It's almost hard not to see Roman influence. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Egypt, India, China, Africa, Greece, Rome. It's really clear when you look closely that these ancient cultures weren't just about wars and conquests. There was so much innovation, cooperation, incredible building, deep thinking.
Absolutely. History is full of these positive stories, these examples of human ingenuity and resilience and the development of values that still resonate.
It really makes you think.
And maybe that's the final thought to leave people with. How can these ancient solutions, these stories of tackling challenges thousands of years ago, maybe offer us some perspective or even inspiration for the challenges we face today?
The great question to ponder. And for you listening, if this journey through the positive side of ancient history sparked your curiosity, please do subscribe so you don't miss our future explorations. Feel free to share this discussion with friends or family who love digging into the past. You'll find links to resources if you want to read more in the show notes, which also helps support our work. And most importantly, keep questioning, keep thinking critically, and always seek that deeper understanding.